بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the second class in our series of Tools of Inner Transformation, an Islamic psychology approach. Today, inshallah, we're going to be talking about our relationship with ourselves. And so for those of you who weren't here last week, we talked about self-awareness and how we can understand the entities within ourselves in order to strive towards Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. It's okay. So that discussion is really important prior to this one because, you know, we need to know the entities within us in order to navigate our way to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. But this topic of our relationship with ourselves, this relationship with I, that's the title of this course, our relationship with I, is such an important topic. And the reason that this topic is very important is because it's often neglected in our communities. We have built this assumption and this belief that if we focus on ourselves, that it's arrogant, it's selfish, it leads to self-obsession, and it's not in line with Islam. So we have this idea within maybe our cultural beliefs that focusing on this relationship with ourselves is actually something that doesn't go with us practicing Islam. And so we need to stray away from this because our discomfort and our fears about talking about this subject actually causes us to stray away from actually understanding it in the right way that can help us actually improve our ability to practice our deen and get closer to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. So we as a community are uncomfortable with terms like self-acceptance. We're uncomfortable with terms like self-love, self-compassion, really because we don't understand what exactly it means, right? And a lot of times we've understood it within the Western thought, within the Western concept. We've understood self-love and self-compassion and self-acceptance within that Western framework. But we have not understood it in a way that merges our deen with it, that merges our relationship with Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala with it. And so we often separate our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with Allah and our relationship with everyone else. Right? And as a culture, a lot of times we think that, focusing on ourselves is selfish, and we think that in order for us to even focus on our relationship with Allah, we have to forget and neglect ourselves completely. And we do this in an extreme way a lot of times. So we have to understand the balance, and we have to understand how to deal with ourselves in a way that is pleasing to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, in a way that fosters our growth, and in a way that promotes a healthy relationship with ourselves and with those around us. So we need to understand that the relationship we have with I, the relationship we have with ourselves, it shapes every other relationship you have in your life. And so from a psychological point of view, the way you understand who you are, the way you feel about who you are, the emotions that you have towards yourself, and the way you deal with who you are has a significant impact on you, on the mental and emotional, on your mental and emotional and physical health. It has an impact on the quality of your lives and and your happiness, and it affects every other relationship. And it affects our ability to practice our deen and fully receive its fruits. Okay? There are so many fruits within our faith that we don't embrace and receive because of this fear that if I do, or if I embrace it, that I'm selfish, or I'm arrogant, or I'm dealing with myself in the wrong way. So how do we approach this relationship that we have with ourselves? Well, last week we talked about self-awareness, and if we increase our self-awareness, that it should lead us to Allah, right? Man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbahu, that whoever knows whoever knows himself knows his Lord. It's that we approach everything through the oneness of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, that we try to understand everything through the worldview of Tawheed, through the monotheistic worldview, is that we see Allah through everything that we're trying to navigate, even in the way that we're dealing with ourselves. If you have any machine in front of you, right, you will have to, in order for you to know how to interact with that machine or how to utilize the entities within that machine, you have to refer to the manual that was manufactured by the maker, right? You have to go to the manufacturers, you have to go to the makers. And, if you'd said, I'll just do this on my own, I'll navigate my way on my own, we'll think you're wasting your energy, you're wasting your time, right? Go to the one who designed this machine. Go to the one who made it, who understands it. But when we come to interact with ourselves, we need to do the same thing. We need to do it through the one who designed us, the one who knows us better than we know ourselves. And if you decide to have a relationship with yourself through yourself, that's your choice. But know that there's a lot of suffering in that, because your view and your understanding of who you are and how to interact with the entities of yourself is very limited. So you're not going to be able to fully interact with yourself in a healthy way, just as a person wouldn't know how to interact with a machine without going to the manual. It's the same thing. So this is how we approach it. We approach self-awareness through Allah. We approach self-acceptance, self-love, self-compassion through Allah. So the first step towards having a relationship with yourself is self-reflection. We need to reflect on who we are. And last week we talked about our mind and how this mind is such a powerful tool in collecting information from the world, processing it, right? Interpreting it, storing it. And this mind of ours is constantly deriving meanings from our experiences. So it's collecting information, but it's also interpreting. It's making sense out of this information we collect. And when throughout our entire life, we're always going through experiences, and through every experience, we're making interpretations of those experiences, which these interpretations, they lead to belief systems that we have. So every experience that you go through, you're constantly deriving meanings in life. And these meanings lead to your beliefs about what? About who you are, about your strengths, your weaknesses, about who others are, about how they view you, about the world, your perspective of the world. You're constantly shaping the way you view everything. So each one of us right now has belief systems about what kind of person they are, about, what makes them valuable, right? About how others view them, about how the world functions. Each of us has a unique set of belief systems that we have acquired through our own experiences. And a lot of times when we made those interpretations about who we are, about the world, about our experiences, we did not involve Allah in the process. We did not try to see or make interpretations through Allah and through our deen, which is there to help us do that, right? We just depended on our mind to figure out everything. Okay, 1 + 1 = 2, rational. But when the heart is activated, it allows you to derive meanings about who you are, about the world in a way that is accurate, right? That is more in line with our deen. So we must reflect on the beliefs we have about ourselves. Self-reflection is such a big part of our practices within our faith, is that constantly Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is encouraging us to reflect. And that includes about who you are, right? That includes about reflecting about what your strengths and weaknesses are. That includes reflection about, your design and how Allah created you. That involves, and you have to reflect on the beliefs that you have about who you are. This is something that I've seen so many times working, providing therapies, that the beliefs about yourself affects the health and well-being of everything else. If you go through life not having healthy beliefs about yourself, and you haven't taken the time to reflect on them, where you got them from. One thing that we utilize in therapy is that when a person tells us that they have a certain belief about who they are, we ask them, what evidence do you have to support that claim? Meaning, what is the evidence in your life that supports that, say, you're a failure or you're worthless? Where did you get this from, right? Because that's how we get information all the time, and we're driving meanings about our life all the time about who we are. And so we must engage in self-reflection. We must ask ourselves really important questions. Why do I think this way about myself? Where did I get it from? And how do these beliefs affect my life? Because they do. They affect how you deal with your spouses, your children. They affect how you deal with your supervisors. They affect the view that you have about your life. So self-reflection is the first step. Is that remember last week we said the mind is the servant, right? So that it's a powerful tool we must learn how to use in the right way. Utilizing your mind to reflect on these belief systems is a crucial first step. You're utilizing your mind in the appropriate way. Then we should talk about self-worth, right? Because we must feel valuable. We must see value in ourselves. And when we talk about self-worth, it's often, we associate it with, oh, if I see value in myself, I'm going to be arrogant, right? And so we're going to talk about these things. But we must engage in self-reflection in order to arrive at our self-worth. And where do we see our self-worth? Who do we see our self-worth through? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So we must go to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about us in order to really learn about our value. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that indeed we have created the human being upon the best of forms. This is Surah Al-Teen. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He created us in the best of form. He says He is the one who made perfectly everything He has created. He began the creation of human beings with clay, and He made His progeny from a quintessence of the nature of a fluid despised. But He fashioned him in due proportion. Key word, He fashioned him in due proportion and breathed into him something of His spirit. This ayah and the tafsir of this ayah and the explanation of this ayah indicates that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about His creation, He's not limiting us to physical capabilities. He talks about our human spirit. And the explanation here talks about that this involves everything: our human will, our emotional capacity, our intellectual capacity, our drive, our longing and yearning for Him, our innate curiosity to navigate our way through life. All of this Allah created within us. And so Allah did not leave anything out of His when He created us. And we must understand and try to reflect on our value through Allah, because if we don't, we are going to seek our value through the creation. If we do not seek our value through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make an active effort to understand who we are through Allah, whether you want to or not, you are going to seek your value and your self-worth through the creation. And so we must be aware of this, because, this is something that we constantly have to put an effort for. In every little thing that we seek our value through. Am I seeking my value in this moment through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or through the creation? The way I dress, the way I act, where am I seeking my value from? And so we must always do it through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know that if we seek our value through the creation, well, value according to the creation goes up and down, right? What was valuable today wasn't valuable maybe 100 years ago, right? Value according to the perspective of our limited vision as human beings is always changing. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about our value so that we can hold on to that, so we can hold on to that and make sure that He knows that it's in our innate instinct to want to feel valuable, right? And He wants us to feel valuable. And He gives us countless ayahs that it would take me forever to list here about how much Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala values us. But we neglect this and we say, no, if I focus on that, I'm going to be arrogant. But yet, every single day, we seek our value through society and through the creation. But then when it comes to talking about our self-worth and our value, we think, oh no, that's going to lead us to arrogance. Let's be careful there, So we must commit to that even when we think about our value, we have to reflect on it within our faith and within the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to see our value. Okay, so now that we have talked about our value and our self-worth, seeking it through Allah, let me ask you a question. Can we accept our value? Can we accept that we're valuable in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This is where we hesitate, where we resist, right? We know this up here. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored the son of Adam. We know all these beautiful things about how much Allah loves us and values us, right? But have we accepted it in our hearts? Has our hearts accepted what our mind knows? Okay, so we have to ask ourselves this. Why can't we accept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us with value? Did you ever think that before your creation you were nothing? That Allah created you from nothing into existence? That's the epitome of love. He gave you purpose. That before you were even created, you were nothing. No one would have known your name. But yet he even commands your parents to name you with the best of names. So not only did he give you life, he gave you not only did he give you life and existence, he wanted you to live nobly on this earth. Have we really accepted that? Have we really reflected upon that? Because if we utilize our minds to serve our hearts, we will utilize our minds to engage in these types of reflections that activate this love and this bond between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But yet every day we minimize ourselves thinking that, like thinking that we're not good enough, but according to who, right? According to who do you most of the time, when we minimize our, like who we are, or we minimize what we have, a lot of times we think that is humbleness, but unfortunately it's under the disguise of humbleness, right? Because when you understand that it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you wouldn't minimize it, because you don't minimize the gift when you understand who the giver is, right? You know that if you believe in your heart that everything that you have is truly a gift from Allah, you would never minimize it, because you know it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But sometimes I think that we minimize it because subconsciously, without us knowing it, we think it comes from us. That's when we minimize, because we think it comes from us. Oh, no. So we have to really reflect on all the things that are going on behind the things that we say. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now talking about self-acceptance, can we accept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created each of us in a unique fashion? That not one person in this room is is completely the same as another person in this room? That each of you is unique in your personality, in your look, in your strengths, in the attributes that you have? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create you in vain? That He did not create you without purpose? That everything that He has allotted within you, when we think of what Allah has given us, we always think of it in terms of material gain, right? Like, what Allah has given me in wealth or risk, but we don't think about it in terms of personality, in terms of characteristics, in terms of demeanor, in terms of looks, we don't think of it in that way. We think of it, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me shelter and gave me health and gave me, good family. Alhamdulillah, that's great. We shouldn't minimize that. But your personality, your look, the way you are with people, these are all your strengths. These are all from Allah too. That's risk. That's from Allah. So accept that. Accept it. You shouldn't be afraid if you're not afraid to accept a risk that has come to you, you shouldn't be afraid to accept that that's how Allah created you. That's your personality, So, and even, our ambitions. Within each of us, one person can be driven towards art, another person is driven towards something else. This is from Allah. He put within us each unique drives towards certain ambitions. But without self-reflection, we wouldn't understand this. Without really reflecting, if you truly understand that Allah has created each one of you in a unique fashion, you would spend time reflecting, okay, what did Allah give me? And now, okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me this, alhamdulillah. Allah gave me this personality trait, alhamdulillah. How can I utilize it? How can I use it to serve Him? How can I use it to serve His creation? But if you don't practice self-acceptance, you won't know what to do with what you have. You can't do anything if you haven't accepted what you have, right? Can you do anything with money that you didn't accept? You have to accept it first. So you have to accept everything that Allah has given you that makes you you, because it's from Him. And once you can accept it, then you could say, okay, now what can I do with it? Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that among His signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the variations in your languages and your colors. Verily in that are signs for those who know. When we think about this ayah, we often think of it in terms of cultures, right? And different groups of people across the world. But this is in our variation. We're all different. Accept your diversity even on an individual basis. One of the roots of suffering is when we try to compare ourselves to other people. This is one of the doors of suffering, is when you try to live your life trying to be someone else. You're trying to be someone else when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you so much that can make you the best version of who you are if you utilize it in the right way. But we spend our energy thinking, oh, look what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given that person. I don't have that. You have a lot, but you just haven't practiced self-reflection. And we need to encourage our children, we need to encourage them to do this, to reflect on who they are, reflect on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them, so that they can learn how to utilize it and how to serve Him through these gifts that He has given them. So, one thing that we always say, I can't accept this because it will make me arrogant. And one more point about that is that arrogance is when you're deceived to think that you're the source of what you have. Okay? Arrogance is when you think that what you have makes you more valuable and worthier than someone else. So that's arrogance. But if you're seeing Allah through what you have, how is that arrogance? If you see Allah through what you have, that's not arrogance. That's you attributing it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's narrated that Anas ibn Malik said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah is pleased with a person who eats some food and then praises Him, and who drinks some drink and then praises Him for it. Meaning that any risk that you have, you experience it. Yes, go ahead, please. Yeah, no problem. No problem. So anything that you experience, that you get, you thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. This is the same with anything that we have within our personalities, within the unique traits that Allah has given us. And in Madarij al-Salikin, some of the righteous predecessors of the Salaf tradition said that whoever conceals a blessing has denied it. But whoever manifests it and spreads it has given thanks for it. Your utilization of what Allah has given you is a form of gratitude. But we spend so much energy thinking about it being arrogant, when actually that our utilization of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us is actually a form of gratitude. And Ibn al-Qayyim, he comments on this and he says that this is based on the words that when Allah bestows a blessing upon His creation, He loves to see the effects of His blessings to be seen on His slave, on His servant. Meaning that Allah loves to see us utilize the blessings that He has given us. He loves to see that. Why would Allah give us something and not expect us to enjoy it? Why? That would be so cruel. Allah would never do that. Allah gives us so we can enjoy, but as long as we see Him through everything that we do. When a parent gives a child a gift, right? And the child takes the gift and he totally disregards the parent and he goes and plays with it, right? The parent is giving the gift to the child. Why? So he could see his love for so the child could see his love for the parent's love for the child through the gift. But in this case, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to take the gift, but see the love of Allah through the gift, right? See Allah through the gift. And so the gift is there to direct us to Allah. Just like we said, anything, when we reflect upon the creation, we reflect upon the heavens and the earth, the sun and the moon, the oceans, anything, it should always bring us back to who? The designer, the creator. Same thing with everything that you have, rejoice in the fact that He made you unique, that He took the time to perfect you for the best version of you, who you are, Take that time and think and then reflect on how you can utilize these abilities to serve Him as a form of gratitude to the one who gave you all these things. When we start practicing self-acceptance, we won't have time to compare ourselves to other people. We're too busy looking at what Allah has given us and how we can utilize it for His sake. There's something that says, I don't compete with other people. I'm too busy competing with the version of myself that was yesterday, right? This is honestly the essence of living a life of quality and happiness, because you don't have time. Allah has given you a lot, and there's a lot of things that you need to reflect on, to utilize in order to serve Allah, and to actually live these qualities. So, there's this concept in existential psychology that says depression is the gap between where we are and where we think we should be, right? So, and I'll explain it. It's that, a lot of times we have the version of ourselves that we are today, and then we have this ideal version that we have in our mind of where we think we should be. And in our mind, we associate that ideal version with happiness. We say, when I get to that, I'm gonna be happy. And they say depression is in that gap. Because here's the thing. When you're so busy focusing on where you should be, you ignore where you actually are, so you end up being in that gap in the middle where you're not enjoying what Allah has given you in the present, but you're not even there where you are in the future. And they say depression is in that gap. Makes sense, right? Because when you're present, you can see everything. When you accept, you can see everything, right? You can see the reality. That's, our happiness comes when we are present in the reality of what actually exists and not in the illusion of what we don't know will exist or not. So now we talked about self-acceptance. Let's go to the one we're probably the most uncomfortable with, which is self-love, right? And we have to understand that we cannot truly learn how to love and to show compassion and to treat others, in the best way if we have not truly directed that to ourselves. But we first must understand Allah's love towards us. When we practice the attributes of Allah, when we're supposed to learn about the attributes of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and we're supposed to learn how to practice them, right? But first, we have to reflect on the attributes of Allah. And first, when we reflect on the attributes of Allah, we reflect on how Allah expresses those attributes towards His creation. But are we not His creation too? We also are His creation. Just as we are supposed to practice those attributes towards His creation, others, those around us, we must learn to practice those attributes towards ourselves. So first, we must reflect on the attributes of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala and how He expresses them towards us. And we must put ourselves in that us. We are the creation too. And then at the same time, before not to say don't practice those attributes towards others, but while you're doing that, you should also learn how to practice them towards yourself. You cannot give what you don't have. And you cannot fully give something in the best quality and in the best form if you have not experienced it yourself. Okay? And this goes, a mother who does not fully care for herself cannot care for her children in the best shape or form, give them the best quality of care. This is a fact of life. You can't give what you don't have. And even when you give, it's not going to be the best giving you can give. It's not going to be the best quality because you haven't experienced it yourself. So we must understand we must even reflect on how Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala loves us. Many of us don't, I remember, I remember hearing this comment one time, which is like when we talk about love, we have to be careful because we shouldn't focus on love too much because we're going to lose the fear of Allah and the consciousness of Allah. But who said that love and fear are opposites? Who said that? In the Quran, it's hope and fear, right? In the Quran, Allah tells us that we're trying to practice a balance between hope and fear. It's not love and fear. Why? Because love is a foundation of everything. It's through the love of Allah that we hope for His reward, and it's through the love of Allah that we fear His anger. We must understand that love never went away. And I want you to think of this because in the terms of, a mother and her child, a mother will sometimes put consequences on certain like actions, right? Like she'll say, not all actions she'll put a consequence on, but for some, depending on how much it hurts her child, right? Or how beneficial that action is for her child, she's going to put a consequence if he doesn't do it. But where is it coming from? Love. She loves her child. So let's take an example. A mother will want her child, just very simple and minimal, but like she wants her child to make sure that he eats his dinner, right? And so she knows that, if she doesn't put a consequence on coming to the dinner, if he doesn't come to the dinner table, she knows that her child is not going to eat. The child doesn't care about eating. He doesn't know that, how much the mother cares about him eating. But she needs to put a consequence because in those times where he doesn't come out of love, that he at least comes out of fear of the consequence. But in reality, the intention was the same. She wants him to eat, right? Think of salah. Salah is the strongest link we have between us and Allah. And the consequence of not praying is very heavy, right? It's one of the heaviest consequences that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, Allah does not even look at the abd who doesn't pray, right, on the Day of Judgment. But let's think about this. Salah is the strongest link we have between us and our Creator. And Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala would never put us on this earth without giving us a link between Him and us out of His love. Because He knows we need Him even when we don't know we need Him. So he wants us to keep praying, because even in the times when we don't come through love, we come because we fear the consequence of that prayer, but it's because he knows we need it, even when we don't know we need it. We need salah, and Allah loves us so much, he knows what we need, even when we don't know we need it. But a lot of times we don't look at it through love. We look at it through, he's making me, people think of it, he's making me pray. He knows you need this. He knows that in this dunya, you're not going to survive without him. And that you're from him, through him, back to him. And that while you're on this dunya, you have salah, the strongest link between you and him. And if you abandon it, you're going to experience much suffering. And so he makes the consequence high because he loves us so much, and he wants us to keep praying, even when we don't recognize how badly we need him. Just like a mother would put consequences on things because she knows her child doesn't know any better, right? So we need to reflect on how much Allah loves us through whatever he asked us to do, whatever he asked us not to do, through the consequences and the rewards, through the hope and the fear. That love is always there. Love is the foundation, and we should never stop talking about Allah's love for us. That actually it's his love that will drive us to fear angering the one that we love. You don't want to hurt the one that you love. But we have to stop making love and fear opposites, because they're not. And we should stop limiting our talk about love in general and Allah's love for us. And every love that we experience in this world, where is the source of it? It's Allah, right? Your love, the love that Allah puts in a mother's heart for her child, where is that coming from? Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. So love should drive us to the source of all love. So we must feel Allah's love for ourselves, and it's essential for us to feeling Allah's love for us is essential for us to experience self-worth, to feel valued, to feel loved. I think, in therapy I see the trauma and the suffering that a child goes through in life when he doesn't feel that his parent loves him. That he goes through life not loving himself, not feeling adequate, just because he does not understand that his parent loves him, right? Now imagine going through life not understanding that the creator of you and your parents doesn't love you. We need to reflect on this. We need to reflect on how much love Allah has for us. And trust me that going through life without experiencing love and this relationship between you and Allah is the biggest loss, Allah created us, I talked about this last week, that, when we talk about how Allah did not create jinn or ins except to worship him, the term ibadah is not limited to external worship. It's to know Allah, it's to experience Allah, it's to love Allah, And unfortunately, we limit our deen to just the works of, our limbs, and it's so much more to that. It's founded on love. That why would Allah create this whole system if he didn't love us? Why would he even give us purpose and existence if he didn't love us? So feel that love from your creator and walk with your head held high because of that love, And there's a few things that I find really ignite this understanding of Allah's love for us. And one is, how Allah tells us in the Quran that he is closer to us than our own jugular veins. Such a powerful ayah that's how close he is. And he, even the term, the jugular vein is, a vein, that's so close to, right, where it leads to our hearts. And if we, if that gets cut off, we lose our life, right? So another thing is Hadith Qudsi. I treat my servant, where Allah Subhanahu wa Taala says, I treat my servant as he hopes that I would treat him. I am with him whenever he remembers me. If he remembers me in his heart, I remember him in my heart. If he remembers me in a gathering, I remember him in a gathering, far better than that gathering. If he draws near to me a handspan, I draw near to him an arm's length. If he draws near to me an arm's length, If he draws near to me a handspan, I draw near to him an arm's length. And if he comes to me walking, I go to him running. It's like he still does more than what we do, subhanAllah, So he's there. There's a saying, I don't remember who I heard it from, but when you feel far away from Allah, you should ask yourself who moved, because Allah never moves away from us. He's always there. It's us that move away. It's us that make that decision to move away. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that when Allah loves a person, He calls Jibreel and He says, I love so and so, so love him. He commands Jibreel to love that person. So Jibreel loves him. Of course, he obeys the command. Then he calls out to the angels and he says, Allah loves so and so, so love him. So the people of heaven love him, and he finds acceptance from the creation on earth. This is what Allah does when He loves someone. Think about how much we care about certain people loving us in this world, or when someone who we think of high value recognizes us and how we rejoice in that. This is what Allah does in the heavens when He loves just one person. That He makes it known, not only to Jibreel but to the angels. He makes sure that that Jibreel alayhi salam knows, and the angels knows, and He makes sure that there's acceptance for this individual on the earth, the heavens and the earth. Subhanallah. Have we really accepted that? Have we really understood that this is what Allah does when He loves me? These are the things that we should bring to life. These are the things that we should really reflect upon. This is what it means to utilize the tools that Allah gave you in the right way, is that you reflect on this deen that He gave you, and you reflect on it and how you can utilize it to improve your well-being, to improve your health, and to promote a better relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another thing that I always think of is the hadith where the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he tells Umar ibn al-Khattab that, Omar first says to the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, oh Allah's Messenger, you are dearer to me than everything except my own self, right? And the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam told him that, you will not have complete faith till I am dearer to you than your own self. Did the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, what can we take away from this? Omar loved himself. And did the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam say, no, don't love yourself? Scratch this. What is this love that you have for yourself? He didn't say that. He just said that your love for me should be greater than the love that you have for yourself. That these things that we learn about love and showing love and compassion towards His creation, that it doesn't mean that we shouldn't show it to ourselves. I remember I heard this from a Muslim neuropsychologist. She was talking about, who does a lot of work about parenting. She says, a mother who has not learned to love herself will not fully be able to love her children. And a father who is never proud of himself will never fully be able to be proud of his children. You can't give what you don't have. And you know what happens when we don't learn to embrace these qualities within us and towards ourselves? Is that we treat people as an extension of who we are, instead of treating them as individual, unique beings that are Allah's creation and separate. We mesh people together. We mesh people with our need. We look at people as an extension of our needs. So when we haven't truly embraced these qualities towards ourselves, we look to other people to fulfill those qualities, right? To fulfill those things that we need, like love and compassion. So then, parents will look to their children to be an extension of who they are, rather than if they love themselves and they embraced who they are, they can teach their children to do the same, right? So this is very important. All of these things are important and they affect our lives constantly. I remember I had a client, she was in her late 40s, and she was telling me how throughout her entire life, she's always been used to just beating herself down, and she was suffering because of this, right? That every little thing she criticized herself and beat herself down for it, and she thought that she needed to do this. She thought that this is what helps her become a better person. She was miserable. She was miserable. Allah did not ask us to abuse ourselves in that way. Allah did not ask us to utilize our minds in that way, even towards ourselves. So I asked her, I said, she was talking about a particular situation that she was beating herself up about. And I asked her, I said, what would you do? What would you say to a friend if she came to you, someone that you love, if she came to you with that situation? She said, well, I would be compassionate towards her, and I would tell her that, this is not a reflection of who she is, and I could help her, navigate her way through the situation and help her not, be kind towards her in this situation. I said, why can't you do the same for yourself? To her, that was a shock. She never understood. She never learned that what you do to others, you deserve to feel too. And unfortunately, many of us, especially in our cultures, we haven't learned that either. We don't teach this. We don't teach this. We teach, unfortunately, a culture of people pleasing sometimes more than focusing on which not to say we should help others and we should put others, we should treat others' needs with great importance, but we should also learn how to practice those qualities, those noble qualities towards ourselves. And this is something that we need to teach. And when you teach this, you will allow for children to grow, to do beautiful things, not for the sake of pleasing other people, but for the sake of wanting to practice those attributes and those qualities towards others. It comes from a more sincere place. It comes from a more authentic place. But when we don't have self-worth, our intention in helping and in doing sometimes is skewed when we think it's noble, but in reality it's serving our nafs, because our nafs is unhappy because of these things that we're not giving ourselves, right? So a lot of times, that's why self-reflection, self-acceptance, showing these qualities to ourselves are really important, because they help you not seek them out under the disguise of good deeds in other people, right? With other people. So a lot of times we have these wounds within ourselves and we think we're doing good things, but in reality we're just serving these wounds, right? So we need to work on ourselves. It always amazes me how much in therapy when I work with clients, how when they learn to deal with themselves in the right way, that it actually helps their relationship with Allah. That it actually allows them to receive the fruits of this deen, right? That it actually allows them to break the barriers between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As long as what? And this is what differentiates Islamic counseling from any type of counseling. As long as Allah is in the equation from the beginning. Is that you're seeking a better relationship with yourself through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, I just want to, end with this concept, which is knowledge is something we should always be seeking, because it helps expand our horizons. And without knowledge, we can't learn to really improve anything about ourselves. We need to seek knowledge about concepts like this and how we can practice them in our life. And we can't let our discomfort towards these topics make us not learn them, because they affect our lives to the 10th degree. They affect how you are with your children. They affect the way you view other people. They affect how you view the world and how people treat you. They affect everything. And most importantly, they affect the quality of your life. And Allah did not want us to utilize our minds to keep us, unhappy. Allah wants us to feel happiness in the right way. Allah wants us to experience joy. Allah wants us to live a life full of quality, right? So, as a reminder to myself and to you, look at these concepts as actually doorways and pathways to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that may Allah allow us to constantly seek a knowledge that helps us improve our relationship with Him and improve the quality of the way we practice our faith. So, Jazakumullah khair. Take questions now, inshallah. How old is he? He's 9. Yeah. Children learn a lot by what they see, a lot of times more than what you're saying to them. So keep doing what you're doing and know that he's seeing everything that you're doing. That even though he might not be doing the things that you are role modeling for him, that know that what they see is very powerful and that it always comes around, inshallah. Yeah. Any questions?
Whenever you find that obstacle, what can you do to achieve that?
Okay, so can you give me an example of an obstacle?
I don't know, you maybe you go through your life and then for example with your client where something happens and then you automatically start self-hating yourself. Mm-hmm. It's how can you divert from self-hating to self-love?
Yeah. Okay, so this is something that takes a lot of practice, that people spend years trying to cultivate this. And this is really important because a lot of times there are people who know how to do it better than others, right? Depending on their experiences. So before we talked about how our experiences shape the way that we interpret things towards ourselves. There are people who need a lot more work because maybe they grew up in environments where that wasn't fostered, right? They grew up in environments where they weren't taught to value themselves, where they were maybe verbally abused constantly or put down, so for them it might take a lot more work, right? But it's definitely something that it starts with dialogues like this and learning and seeking knowledge about the concept. But it's also, one of the things that I find useful in helping clients with this is that to be in the moment and to be present in those moments, right? And to recognize the emotion that's going on, to have that awareness. So a lot of times we don't even realize that we're like putting ourselves down. It's become such a form of habit that we don't even recognize it anymore. So with a client, we would like help them recognize what they're doing. And a lot of them are even shocked when you like interpret for them what they're actually doing with themselves. So it takes a lot of self-reflection. And it's not a coincidence because, reflection is something that's so rootly ingrained in the teachings of Islam that like we don't often sit and think about how we feel about certain things. We just go like we're annoyed and then we take it out on the next person. And at the end of the day, we're like, why were we so frustrated? And, so it definitely takes the number one, the ability to be present, right? That when you're frustrated, take the moment to think about why you're frustrated. Think about what just triggered that emotion in yourself and ask yourself. In the beginning, I was saying like, sit with yourself. And this is an exercise that's amazing. Sit with yourself and write down the things that you believe about yourself. Write your beliefs about who you are. Write your beliefs about your strengths, about your weaknesses. Ask yourself where you got them from. What evidence do you have to support these things? It takes a lot of background work in order for us to be strong in those moments that you're referring to, because if we're not practicing them outside of those moments will come and automatically the emotion is so powerful, it takes us into the gear that we're used to. So it takes a lot of background work. But we don't take this area seriously a lot of times. Because it's emotions, we think like, it's not a big deal. We value the physical self more than we value the psychological and emotional self, right? We think that anything physical issue is much more serious. But, emotional issues are very serious and that they actually can manifest themselves physically if we don't take care of them. So just to summarize, it takes a lot of background work in order for you to be strong in those moments. And this is where we come in, seeking knowledge, reflecting, and reading about things that can help us practice these skills. Any other questions? Yes.
Would you recommend any books?
Yes, actually, when it comes to self-compassion, Dr. Neff, it's called Self-Compassion, and it's actually a complete self-compassion workbook. So she gives you like exercises in there, but it's a phenomenal book. I finished this book twice, so it's really amazing. It's a book that, and her concepts I felt are very in line with the teachings of Islam. I didn't feel like she said anything major that was out of line with what we would learn. NEFF is the last name of the and and self-compassion is the title. What's really interesting is that she actually did her research on self-compassion because she realized, and I actually agreed with this totally, which is self-esteem is not what we should be teaching, right? They teach us self-esteem exercises with kids, it's all about like, look at these unique, write down these things that make you better than other people and make you different than other people. And like, it's so different than self-compassion. Self-compassion is, it's something that actually research has shown to promote more growth and progression and improvement than self-esteem. So her work is like, she actually strayed away from this concept of self-esteem and focused a lot of her work on self-compassion. And it's actually available on audio too if you guys don't have time to read the book. So, any other?
I think I'm really like in our community, I feel like when it comes to younger kids, we always teach them like Islam through the fear of the law first before the love of law.
Mm-hmm.
I think that like a lot of our problems come from that.
Yeah.
With my little brother-in-law, like I'm noticing like when we try to, like we ask them like, oh, do you think Allah loves you? Like, do you think you will go to Jannah? They're like 9. And he's like, oh no, like it's easier to get to hell. Like Allah's like probably mad at me. And we're like, no, like what makes you think that?
Yeah.
It's just growing up like if you don't pray, Allah doesn't like you.
Yeah.
You don't like it's always like
Yeah.
Allah Allah doesn't like you because of this.
Yeah.
But now we're like, you know, my husband trying to do exercises with them, like, no, like Allah wants to talk to you, like Allah wants to hear from you, you know?
Yeah.
And now you see them like, oh, really? He does? Like,
Yeah.
he loves me? And they get so
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah.
So I feel like we drive a lot of the youth away by starting with the fear first.
Yeah.
Then the love.
But again, see, like even in that statement, we say we start with the fear more than the love. Again, we shouldn't put them in the same sentence because fear and love are not, they can't be comparable, okay? Love is the foundation, and through it is hope and fear, right? Is that through the love of Allah that you fear to anger Him, that you don't want to upset the one that you love. And this goes back to, do we really love Allah? And what is love of Allah? And what does it mean to love Allah, right? So that's what we should be teaching. And when we say these things, we shouldn't say love of Allah or fear of Allah. It should always be hope and fear, but what? Love is the foundation. Yeah.
It's something interesting about that. If you think about it, when you love something and the fear comes out of the love, you're like less likely to digress based on if it's just fear by itself.
Yeah.
So if you don't love that person and you have that fear, you're more likely to digress because it's like, oh, I'll just deal with the consequences.
Right.
But when you have that love, it's more like
Yeah.
shame and like fear.
Yeah, and you know, that's actually a very phenomenal point. You know, when we have fear in the absence of love, that actually causes us to lead people like astray, you know, because it leads to depression. The fear is just, there's fear there, but it's not through love. So it's not the right, accurate fear, you know? So fear in the absence of love is not the right type of fear, right? And actually, if you think of like, even the fear, it's more like khashya or awe or consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we don't want to anger the one that we love, and we don't want the consequences. We also should fear the consequences, right? We should fear the consequences because the consequences are heavy, but we should not, when we acknowledge the fear of the consequence, we should not forget that it is through Allah's love that He put the consequence, right? That's the thing, is that it's okay. We have to learn how to fear Allah's anger and Allah's consequence, but we must not forget His love for us when we talk about the consequence. So a lot of times we'll divulge and we'll say, oh my God, why would Allah put this consequence, and where's the love? The love is there. It's actually because of His love that He's telling you, stray away from this, you know? So, yes.
How do we make sense of the idea that the sacrifice of yourself is Islamic, is the Islamic? Or, you know,
Like, I would call that more like the victim, playing the role of like the victim, you say, or?
sometimes, you know, the way that someone is for
Yeah.
or something like that, where you feel like, oh, you know, you're pleasing Allah by, you know,
Yeah.
going through what you're going through.
Yeah. So she's asking the question about, you know, we have this concept, she's talking about this concept or this tendency that we have to promote this type of like self-sacrifice, right? That you endure even when it's like, say you're being oppressed or you're going through struggles, like you endure the difficulty. And where does that fall in line with like accepting and loving yourself and taking care of yourself? So, you know, number one, Allah did not promote us allowing oppression upon ourselves, right? And that this is something as a human being that we should be conscious of not allowing that on ourselves, right? And so when we understand how much Allah has valued us and took care of us and wants us to have, you know, wants us to take care of our lives and ourselves, you know, that we should ask ourselves, what are we really sacrificing for, you know? It depends on every situation, obviously, and every situation is unique, but there is this concept in our culture where we completely neglect ourselves at the expense of calling it piety, right? And this is not the way, you know, that taking care of ourselves is actually essential. And after you put forth the effort, you put forth to take care of yourself, to making sure that you get rid of you try to put the steps forth to, sabr does not mean you just stay still, you know. She was talking about sabr. Sabr does not mean you just stay still and do nothing. Sabr means that while I accept this and while I am patient until you bring me relief, I will continue to work and try to relieve myself of the situation. Is that you take personal responsibility. And a lot of times when we talk about sabr, we think that it relieves us of personal responsibility, even though we don't say this. But sabr, it means that while I am patient, while I am waiting, Ya Allah, from you alone to relieve me, I will continue to work to make sure that I put forth the effort in front of you to relieve myself. And so, you know, sabr and these things of like, you know, being patient and making sure that we like, you know, we're patient with our struggles does not mean we do not work hard to get ourselves out of our struggles. That's actually not an Islamic concept, and that is not something that Allah wants us to be, how Allah wants us to be with ourselves. But if we're putting forth the effort to get ourselves out of that struggle, and Allah is still putting, allowing that struggle to endure, you still be patient. But that means that that doesn't mean I stop taking the effort to get myself out of that struggle. So there is no I'm the victim, I'm just waiting. We have this in our culture a lot, this self-victimization culture where, whenever Allah wants, and, I'm sabura and I'm patient, and, we play the role of the victim a lot. We need to take ownership of our problems, and we need to take personal responsibility. Yeah.
How do you move on from, say you came from, let's say a mother gave up a child for adoption, or he or she did not grow up with a mother, with the hanan, with the compassion. Like, how do you get over that, and how do you raise your children with love and compassion whether you were brought up with a grandparent or an adopted parent?
Yeah. And that's exactly what I mean about, everybody's experience is so different, and there's so many things that contribute to the way we feel about ourselves. And we need to take the time to reflect on, why they feel that way, and then to reflect on, the Creator, who's far more important than any of these people who have let them down, that His love was always there. And, we think of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who every time that he got, someone was there to take care of him a little bit, he lost that person. But Allah loves the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam the most. His love for him is great, far greater than we can even imagine. And yet, every time the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam had someone take care of him, Allah took that person away, right? And so, but that fostered what? This unbelievable connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we must look at our experiences, every experience, as a doorway to experiencing Allah a little further. That each one of us in this room has a different experience that has affected the way we think about ourselves. But how many of us took that experience as a doorway to connecting on a different level with Allah? So of course, many of us, a lot of people, either, you were giving the example of, being a person being adopted. Other people had their parents, and their parents maybe mistreated them, verbally abused them, put them down, or didn't take care of them in the best way. Some people didn't grow up with any parents or caretakers at all. But that's why in every experience we seek Allah, because that's the only way we heal, is that we recognize. But when we truly understand that His opinion, His love, His compassion towards me is far more important than any creation can offer me, that's when you begin to start, healing. Because you can't bring back those parents, you can't go and rewrite history, right? But you can try to heal through feeling that love from Allah, that He was there the whole time, that, He never left, His love never changed for that person, and in fact, that those struggles, that's why Allah tells us all the time that He tests those He loves, right? That these struggles, that when you're being tested, that there are opportunities for you to experience Allah's love even greater, because He loves those whom He tests. But we have to change the way we look at things. A lot of times we look at this the opposite way. Well, I don't want to be tested, I don't want to get close to Allah because then He's going to test me, Instead of saying that, we just, subhanAllah, because we don't talk about love and we don't really understand Allah's love for us, that we view things the wrong way. That many people were saying, I remember hearing this one time that I don't want to get too religious because then Allah starts sending struggles my way. And but when we realize that everything that Allah gives us or doesn't give us, whatever He tests us with, is through His love, their opportunities, their doorways. One of the most beautiful things I've learned is when one of my teachers taught me about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Allah gives us these attributes as doorways to experiencing Him a little further. If we truly understood that our purpose is to experience Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to worship Him and to know Him and to love Him, and He gives us all of these attributes in order for us to know Him on different levels, right? So every experience will lead you to a doorway, to one of these attributes, right? If you didn't sin, you would never know what it means to experience at-tawwab, right? If you didn't, if you didn't have your doors closed, you wouldn't know what it means to experience al-fattah, right? Al-wadud, when you don't feel loved. These attributes of Allah, these attributes, each one of them could be a healing component on its own. If we understood that every experience we go through in our life is a pathway to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is an opportunity. If we looked at our tests as opportunities, we'd be like, okay, bismillah, we're going to roll up our sleeves and see, like, what does Allah have to teach me through this? And what can I gain with Allah through this experience? Instead of saying, oh God, you know, like, but it's a different outlook. But this outlook only happens when you understand that the foundation of everything that He puts you through is through His love. Yeah. Any questions? Yeah. Oh, I thought you had a question. Okay. Any questions?
يعني بس عايز تشرحي كمان مرة يعني ايه accept the love of Allah.
يعني accept the love of Allah.
انت قلتي يعني to accept Allah love.
Mhm.
يعني إذا واحد ازاي واحد من يعني doesn't accept Allah love. ازاي هيكون مسلم أصلا؟
Well, I think that, you know, a lot of times people don't accept means like to fully feel it in your heart, you know? You know it. Most of us know it, right? And Imam al-Ghazali even talks about this. When he talks about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that many of us know it up here. He splits it into levels. Very few of us have actually had our heart respond to what we know. So you're right. We all know Allah loves us. That's something we all know. But acceptance means that your heart feels a reaction to that. And when your heart feels a reaction to that, this is the next level Imam al-Ghazali talks about, which is our limbs start to, follow that feeling, that reaction. So when I talk about acceptance, I'm talking more about, do we really feel it in our hearts? You know, do we really? And if we do, we should see it through our actions. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Someone else? You had oh, okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Is there like a specific book by Imam Ghazali that you've read?
The 99 Names of Allah is really good by Imam al-Ghazali. But you know, what's interesting about Imam al-Ghazali's books is he always splits it into those levels. Like a lot of the concepts he teaches you can know this, you could then your heart responds to it. He splits it into those levels. So honestly, any of Imam al-Ghazali's books are amazing. My favorite are the 99 Names of Allah and the one on unity of Allah, like tawakkul and trust in divine unity. They're in English, yeah. Okay, so I will stop here. Jazakum Allah khair, and see you next week, inshallah. Can you close that?